Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to pull out the key ideas from really interesting sources, basically doing the heavy lifting for you.
Mhm.
And today, we are diving into Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now. This book, well, it's had a huge impact on a lot of people, offering a different lens on life.
It really has. And it's not just, typical self-help. The power of now goes deep, right into the roots of why we suffer and how we might find genuine inner peace.
Yeah.
It came from Tolle's own pretty intense experiences with anxiety and depression, actually.
Yeah.
He had this kind of radical realization that changed everything for him.
Exactly. And it tackles some huge inner questions. So our mission today in this deep dive is really to get to the core of Tolle's message. We want to see what practical insights you can take away without getting bogged down in, let's say, overly abstract theory.
Right. Like, why do our thoughts feel so overwhelming sometimes?
And what can we actually do about it? How can we be more present?
Well, Tolle's central idea is that there's this fundamental mistake we make. He suggests that most of our pain, our suffering, comes from identifying with our minds. That constant chatter, the worries, the judgments, believing that's who we are.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit. He uses this really vivid analogy, doesn't he? The beggar sitting on a box of gold.
Yeah, the beggar. He's begging for pennies, but he's literally sitting on a fortune.
And that's us, Tolle says. We're often looking outside ourselves for happiness, for validation, totally missing the inner gold we already have.
Exactly. And this mistaken identity, believing we are the stream of thoughts, it creates this kind of filter, or a screen, as he puts
A
it,
screen made of what?
made of all our ideas, labels, judgments, words, images,
Mm-hmm.
everything the mind produces. And this screen, it gets between us and reality. It stops us truly connecting, with ourselves, with other people, even with just what's happening right now.
Like looking through a really smudged window.
Precisely.
Which leads to the obvious question, right? But I need my mind. I use it all the time. How else do I function?
Oh yeah, Tolle definitely anticipates that. His point isn't that the mind is bad, but that often it's not us using the mind.
Uh-huh.
It's the mind using us.
Mhm.
We get sort of swept away by it, unconsciously. He asks this really pointed question. Can you actually choose to stop thinking? Just like that.
Have you found the off button?
Exactly. Have you found the off button? For most people, the answer is probably no.
So that brings us to this thinking voice itself. What is that voice?
Tolle suggests we practice watching the thinker. Just becoming aware of that nonstop internal commentary. The one is always judging, worrying, commenting, replaying the past, rehearsing the future.
It's quite something when you actually pay attention to it, isn't it? A bit unsettling, even.
It is. He makes this comparison, which might sound a bit extreme at first, between that inner voice and, say, the audible chatter of someone we might perceive as mentally unwell. The point isn't to pathologize, but to highlight the compulsive, incessant nature of that thought stream. One is just internal, the other's external, but the mechanism can be similar.
And the danger is that this unchecked voice becomes, what does he call it, a tormentor.
A tormentor in the head, yeah. Constantly creating misery, unhappiness, draining our vital energy with negativity and worry.
But hang on, we do need to think, right? For survival, for planning, problem solving.
Absolutely. The mind is an incredible tool for specific tasks. Tolle acknowledges that.
Yeah.
But he estimates something like 80 to 90% of our thinking is repetitive, useless, and often actually harmful.
Wow, 80 to 90%.
Yeah, just churning, going over the same ground, leaking energy.
Leaking energy. I like that description.
And this is where the concept of the ego comes in. He defines the ego as this false self. It's created by that unconscious identification with the mind.
Okay.
And the ego needs continuous thinking to survive, to maintain its illusion of being a separate, solid entity. It feeds on thought.
So if identifying with this nonstop, often negative mind is the problem, what's the solution Tolle offers?
The solution, the key, he says, lies in the now, the present moment.
The power of now, hence the title.
Exactly. He presents the now as the only place where we can find liberation from the mind's dominance and the suffering it creates.
And he argues that the past and future, they aren't real in the same way.
Right. They're mental constructs. The past only exists now as memory traces in our minds. The future only exists now as anticipation, as thoughts about what might be. They only exist in the present.
He uses that moon analogy, right?
Yeah, like the moon reflecting sunlight. The past and future have no light of their own. They borrow their apparent reality from the now.
And he points out that this isn't some radical new idea, that many spiritual traditions point to the same thing.
Absolutely. He draws parallels with Zen Buddhism, Sufism, Christian mystics like Meister Eckhart. They all, in different ways, emphasize the profound importance of the present moment.
Like the Zen masters asking, what was it?
What, at this moment, is lacking? A question designed to bring you right back here. Or the Sufi saying, the Sufi is the son of time present.
And Meister Eckhart.
His line is incredibly potent. Time is what keeps the light from reaching us. It suggests time, our obsession with past and future, actually obscures a deeper reality.
You know, that reminds me of what you mentioned earlier about really seeing that tree when you weren't caught up in labeling it or thinking about it.
Yes, that was a moment of just perception. Direct perception without the usual mental filter, without the screen of time, of past associations or future plans for the tree. It was just there, and I was just there. That felt like a taste of the now.
Okay, so that sounds great in theory, but how do we actually access this? How do we get into the now more often?
Well, Tolle gives some practical pointers. One simple way is to consciously withdraw your attention from thinking that isn't necessary right now. Like noticing you're worrying about tomorrow and gently bringing your focus back.
Just noticing the mind's tendency to run off.
Exactly. Observing the mind's habit of wanting to escape the present. And here's a crucial point he makes. The very moment you realize you aren't present.
You are.
You are. That realization itself is presence. It's like you've woken up, even just for an instant.
He also talks about how important this presence is in difficult situations, right? When things get heated emotionally.
Yes, hugely important.
Yeah.
Because intense presence creates a kind of space. Instead of just reacting automatically, usually out of fear or old patterns, you have a moment of clarity, a choice in how you respond. It stops unconscious reactions in their tracks.
And what about our hopes for the future? Doesn't focusing on we just stop planning or striving?
Not necessarily striving, but he cautions against the common belief that the future will automatically be better or that happiness is always later. He suggests that if our present consciousness is burdened by unresolved issues and lack of presence,
then the future will likely just be a repeat of the past.
pretty much, the future arises out of the quality of our consciousness now. If we're unconscious now, we're likely creating more of the same for the future.
So it really comes back to the state of mind itself, not just the external problems.
That's the core issue, he argues, the time-bound mind. He says even if you solved all your current external problems, if your fundamental state of consciousness hasn't shifted towards presence, the mind will just find new things to worry about, new problems to create.
Okay, so how can you tell if you're caught in what he calls psychological time? Is there a sign?
Yeah, he offers a really simple litmus test. Is there joy, ease, and lightness in what you're doing?
Joy, ease, and lightness.
If those qualities are missing, he suggests it's a strong indicator that psychological time worrying about past or future has taken over, and the present moment is being seen as just a means to an end or an obstacle.
So it's less about what you're doing.
And much more about how you're doing it. Are you giving your full attention to the present task, the present interaction? Are you accepting what is in this moment, even if it's just washing the dishes?
That acceptance piece seems key.
It's huge. He also talks about this sort of low-level unease, like background static, that often hums along when we're in ordinary unconsciousness.
Background static. Yeah, I think I know what he means.
And people try to drown it out, right?
Yeah.
With endless distractions, workaholism, substances, what he calls anesthetics. But they don't address the root cause.
And challenges. Difficult times.
He sees them as forks in the road. They could either drag us deeper into unconscious patterns, into reactivity, or if we meet them with presence, they can actually wake us up. They serve as tests, in a way. Opportunities.
This ties into the idea of the ego again, doesn't it? Letting go of that false self.
It does, because the ego, that mind-made self, needs things to identify with to feel real. Our possessions, our job title, our opinions, our personal history, even our problems.
But none of that is who we truly are.
According to Tolle, no. That's the illusion. And he asks that really interesting question. Finding this out, is that scary? Or is it actually a massive relief?
A relief maybe, because you don't have to defend all that stuff.
Perhaps. And it connects to his idea of dying before you die.
Which sounds intense.
It means realizing while you're still alive, that core part of you that is timeless, that isn't subject to birth and death, your being. And he says, true love, true joy, they aren't just emotions. They arise from this deeper connection with being, often felt in the gaps between thoughts.
Okay, so connecting with being. He offers a very direct way, doesn't he? Through the body.
Yes, the inner body.
Mm-hmm.
He encourages you to bring your attention inside your physical body
Yeah.
and just feel the life there. Not thinking about it, but directly sensing the energy, the aliveness within your hands, your feet, your whole body.
So it's not just a concept, it's something you can actually feel.
Exactly. It's an experiential doorway into being, into that deeper dimension of life that he calls the unmanifested, right here within the physical form.
And he kind of pushes back against some traditions that maybe devalue the body, right?
He does. He argues strongly that enlightenment or awakening doesn't happen by escaping the body, but through it. He has that phrase, the Sermon on the Body.
What's the gist of that?
That while our perception of the physical body as just solid matter is limited, within it lies the gateway to our essential radiant reality. It's the temple, not the obstacle.
And staying connected to this inner body, what does that do for us day to day?
It anchors you in the now. It acts like an internal anchor, keeping you present. He also suggests it raises your vibrational frequency, making you less susceptible to negativity, both your own and other people's.
So the inner body is one portal. Are there others?
Yes, though he stresses the now as the main one, essential for all the others to function.
Okay.
Another portal is simply the cessation of thinking. Even brief gaps in the thought stream may be achieved through focusing on your breath or really intense focused attention on something.
Just stopping the chatter for a second.
Exactly. He also talks about space, both the physical space around us, becoming aware of that, and also inner space, the stillness of no mind, and silence, not just absence of noise, but the underlying stillness.
He connects this to that Buddhist idea, right? Form is emptiness.
Emptiness is form. Yes, suggesting that the seemingly solid world form and the formless dimension, emptiness, space, silence, being, are ultimately inseparable.
It's kind of mind-bending, this idea that space and time as we perceive them aren't the ultimate reality.
But that they contain the essence of infinity and eternity. He draws this parallel. Outer space and time are illusions, but inner space is no mind, and inner time is presence.
Wow. Okay. And how does all this apply to, say, our relationships?
Relationships. He sees them as a major spiritual practice. He suggests that much of the pain and conflict we experience in relationships stems directly from that identification with the egoic mind, when we're not relating from a deeper place of being.
But they can be a practice. How?
By bringing presence into them. By, for example, learning to express your feelings honestly, but without blaming the other person. By truly listening, giving the other person space, both physically and mentally, just being there with them, fully present.
And acceptance comes in here again.
Massively. He says the greatest catalyst for positive change in any relationship is complete acceptance of your partner as they are right now, without needing them to change for you to be okay.
That's a high bar.
It is. And he defines true love not as the needy, clinging attachment the ego often calls love, but as a state of being, the recognition of oneness, the shared essence beneath the surface forms.
Okay, moving towards the end of the book's core ideas, he talks a lot about surrender. What does he mean by that? It sounds passive.
It can sound passive, but he presents it as something incredibly powerful and active, actually, a form of wisdom.
Okay.
True surrender, for Tolle, means saying yes to the present moment, accepting it completely, unconditionally, without inner resistance. It's about relinquishing that mental and emotional fight against what is.
So not giving up, but stopping the internal battle.
Exactly. It's aligning yourself with the flow of life, rather than pushing against it. He points out that resistance is what creates most of our psychological suffering, and even physical tension. It constricts the flow of life energy.
How do you surrender if you feel resistance?
By noticing it. By acknowledging the resistance, feeling it, witnessing it without judgment. That awareness, focused in the now, is often enough to start dissolving it.
And what happens when we do surrender?
He says it allows a different kind of energy to operate in your life, a spiritual energy, he calls it. It has a higher vibrational frequency than mind energy, and it doesn't create suffering for yourself or others.
He even talks about non-resistance in the face of, like, violence or aggression.
Yes, though it's nuanced. It's not about being a doormat, but sometimes yielding, like in Aikido, can be the most powerful response. Or the power of doing nothing, wu-wei, from a place of intense presence, rather than reacting fearfully.
And illness. How does surrender apply there?
He suggests surrendering not to the idea or the label of illness, which is a mental concept bound in time, but surrendering to the actual physical sensations, the pain or discomfort in this moment. Accepting the reality of the construe he believes activated deeper healing intelligence.
What about really big life challenges? Loss, disaster. He calls them limit situations.
Those, he says, can be powerful catalysts for awakening, precisely because they often force surrender. When the mind's usual strategies fail, when there's nothing left to cling to, intense suffering can crack open the shell of the ego, leading to a profound inner peace emerging from the ashes.
He calls that the way of the cross, right? Enlightenment through suffering.
Yes. But he contrasts it with enlightenment consciously chosen,
Which is?
choosing, moment by moment, to let go of attachment to past and future, choosing to make the now the primary focus of your life before suffering forces you to. He basically asks, how much more pain do you need before you're willing to make that choice?
It's a direct question.
Very. Ultimately, surrender means the mind ceases to be the master. The door opens to being to that underlying stillness, peace, joy, and love that are our natural state.
And this connects to compassion.
Deeply. He defines compassion not just as feeling sorry for someone, but as this profound awareness of the shared bond between yourself and all creatures. Recognizing our shared journey, our shared mortality, but also the eternal life, the being that shines through everyone.
So it's sadness and joy together?
Kind of. Sadness for the suffering, but held within the deeper joy and peace of being. And when you act from that place, you see beyond the outer form of people and connect with their true reality, which itself can be healing.
He paints this picture of a new world emerging from this shift in consciousness.
Yeah, a world that reflects being rather than the egoic mind and its fear. He suggests that when you become fully conscious drama, the suffering the ego creates for itself simply stops entering your life.
Because you're no longer feeding it.
Exactly. The emphasis is always on finding fulfillment within by connecting with that formless, timeless dimension of yourself. External things give pleasure, sure, but it's temporary and often leads to pain. True joy arises from being.
And acceptance, non-resistance, is the key to peace even when things change or fall apart externally, like the deep lake.
Right, the surface might be turbulent, but the depths remain still. Accepting what is this brings that inner stillness.
Okay, so bringing this deep dive into the power of now towards a conclusion, the core message really seems to be about this fundamental shift.
Yeah, a shift in awareness, away from being lost in thought, identified with the mind.
And into the present moment, finding the power, the peace, the aliveness that's only available now.
It's basically an invitation, isn't it? Like Tolle says about the beggar look inside. The real treasure, the richness of being is right here, right now, waiting to be discovered.
It really is. So perhaps a final thought for you, the listener, to take away and maybe play with. Is there one specific thought pattern, one piece of recurring mind chatter that you could start observing today with just a little more detachment?
Or maybe just pick one simple routine activity, brushing your teeth, making coffee, and try bringing your full conscious presence to it. Just notice what that feels like.
See what happens. This has just been a skim, really, of the core ideas in The Power of Now.
Definitely. Diving into the book itself can offer much more depth and guidance on this whole path of inner transformation. It's quite a journey.